Anyway, today I will speak about a small project that I did recently, which is related to something that you already did. It's a live performance, electronic live performance based on the recording of a voice, of a very special voice of a poet whom I adored when I was a young student. I don't know whether you heard about this, but in Austria we have a place that looks like this. It's called House of the Artist, and it's located in a psychiatric hospital near Vienna. And in the 1960s, the director of this institution found out that when he tried to get into contact with psychiatric patients, namely schizophrenic persons, it was easier for him to engage themselves with art. So if they would start painting or writing poems, he could build a connection to them. And one of these persons, his name is Ernst Herbeck, became by this a very famous poet who wrote books. Ernst Herbeck looks like this, or looked like this. He's not living anymore. So he was born 90 years ago, and in his early youth he had some mental disorders and was brought into a hospital where he survived World War II, which is a little bit special because many people, psychiatric patients, were killed by the Nazis in these institutions. The problem that he had was he was schizophrenic, and he had a speaking disability due to a split palate. Maybe I don't know the Finnish word for that, but it's a birth defect which makes it very hard for you to speak because you cannot pronounce transients or hard consonants. And when he was brought into this hospital in the 1960s, you know, in this period where everything starts to open up, and there was a very progressive psychoanalyst and psychiatrist there who discovered that by asking Ernst Herbeck, for example, to write poems, he could get in contact with him. The thing is that he never wrote poems by himself, so he was not one of those guys like Adolf Wölfli, who was the first brut artist in the world. He was a Swiss artist who was hospitalized all over his life, and he was always painting and drawing and making music and creating his whole bizarre world, whereas he is a completely withdrawn person, very shy, and he only wrote if his therapist would tell him, write something about life or love or color reds, and then he would write a poem in front of him immediately, and he would never change it. And this collection of poems that were demanded by his therapist were published in the 1967 under a pseudonym. And this book, when it came out, it became very successful. A lot of avant-garde literature from Austria and Germany became very much interested in this person who writes such great art, poems full of mystery, and the language was completely destructed, and it was really avant-garde. And later his name was revealed, and he wrote until he died in the 1990s. There's another picture of him, which was, it's not a photo, it's a drawing that one of his colleagues in the asylum, so to speak, draw of him. He's nowadays a very famous artist, Oswald Schirtner, and he developed a very specific style of drawing. Once you see a picture of him, you will recognize the others. And that's him. And you see, it's very important, interesting, the mouth. Yeah. So if you I remember the photo that I showed you before. The mouth was covered with a mustache because he had this split lip and palate. But it also looks as if it was closed or sealed. And in fact, it shows that he was not able to speak. In the 1980s, a young doctor came into this institution who had always a Sony Walkman with him, a recorder. And at some times when the patients had their coffee break, they were sitting together, and sometimes they were showing their artwork that they did, or reading the poems. So whenever Herbecks was reading, he was recording him. And by chance, I came in contact with this material. It was a cassette at this time in a very, very poor quality. And then I got a commission from this institution for opening of an exhibition there. And they asked me if I could do something about this institution, this house. And when I heard about this cassette with the voice of this Ernst Herbeck, whom I adored when I was a young man, I said, I do something with that. And this is the project that I show you. First, I would like to show you the poem that I'm using for that. In German, I read it in German first. I guess some of you can understand German. It's very simple. It's like written by a child. Yeah? Das Leben ist schön, so schön als das Leben. Das Leben ist sehr schön. Das lernen wir, das Leben. Das Leben ist sehr schön. Wie schön ist das Leben? Es fängt schön an, das Leben. So schön, schwer ist es das auch. Life is beautiful. So beautiful is life. Life is beautiful. We learn that. Life is beautiful. How beautiful is life? It starts wonderful, beautiful, the life, but it's also so difficult. And if you know the story about his life, you know that this man was never happy, that he lived a very miserable life and he never had a beautiful life. So this is a thing that touched me, so a dream of somebody who is very miserable, but still tries to see things also in a positive way. Now we hear this poem spoken by the artist himself. I project also the text so that we can better understand.
I live in home like I live in home. I live in home. Vi hörde livet. Jag hörde alla livet. Så hör jag av.
So even though you're not speaking German, I think you notice that the difficulties he has of speaking. So if you don't know the text, it's impossible to understand what he's saying. But still it has some content, which is more than just the words. And this is what interests me as an artist. So my idea was using only this sample of his voice for a sound performance, which I played now for you. It's about 10 minutes, and it goes over different stages of articulation of sound. So in the beginning it starts more with breath sounds, then it gets into articulation of little fragments of sounds, particles out of his voice. In the middle you will hear his entire voice speaking, and then it turns into music. So this was roughly the idea. It's a very processional piece, and I will play it now for you. It's written in Max MSP. It's controlled with a MIDI controller, and I have a sort of score which pops up in the right corner, and it tells me what actions I have to do. So you can follow me, so to speak, but mostly you should listen. And then afterwards I can explain you how it is done.